Welcome to my 100th YouTube video. I have looked through the past 99 videos on my channel and I have picked 10 books to tell you about today. They're not necessarily my tippity top favorite books from the past few years, but they are 10 books that I think tell a little bit of the story of this channel or are maybe attached to a memory that's been important to me from the past few years. I think these 10 books will help me tell you a little bit more about me. Thank you so much for joining me for 1 to 99 videos of my journey here on YouTube. And if you're new, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Let's jump right in. First up, we have a book from one of my favorite writers of all time, Sylvia Townsend Warner. This is Kingdoms of Elphin, and it's published by Handheld Press. This book represents the very earliest beginnings of this channel. In fact, this is one of a handful of books that is kind of the seed that helped me come up with the idea to even have this channel in the first place, focusing on small presses, independent publishers, nonprofit presses. I received an email several years ago from my local bookstore saying that they had found a new to them publisher called Handheld Press, and they were so charmed by their books that they picked out a few to sell in the bookstore, even though it's a UK-based publisher. I think there were 3 or 4 books on that list of my local Chicago bookstore that they were selling from Handheld Press. One of them was Kingdoms of Elphin by Sylvia Townsend Warner. I had recently read Lolly Willows and The Corner That Held Them when I saw that email come through, and was so utterly charmed by Sylvia Townsend Warner that I immediately went to the bookstore and picked out this book. This is a book of short stories that explore the various kingdoms of fairies that live in England and in Europe. And in classic Sylvia Townsend Warner style, these tales are told at a little bit of a distance. There's a little bit of feeling of kind of an indifference, or not indifference, detachment. There's not any sentimentality in these short stories. There is the classic deadpan humor that I love so much in her work. They're fairly dark, and they are mostly concerned with the kind of courtly behaviors of these fairy kingdoms. What it says about me, my very first love in literature was fantasy and fairy tales. I love anything that is dark and humorous. That's the perfect combination for me. Dark, strange, otherworldly, filled with kind of a dark humor. That's kind of my favorite kind of writing, and so this is one of my favorite books. I should add, however, that this also tells a bit of the story of this channel and what this channel focuses on, which is small presses. Handheld Press has ceased operations, so they are no more. They just recently, within the past few months, closed down. So it's a real loss, a real loss, because they were such a great little publisher, publishing lots of really weird, quirky stuff. That is kind of part of the deal when you fall in love with a small publisher. You can't really guarantee they're going to be around forever. Next up, we have My Volcano. This is by John Elizabeth Stinson, and this was published in the US by $2 Radio. I believe in Canada it was published by Arsenal Pulp Press. John Elizabeth Stinson is a Canadian writer, and this is a weird and wonderful book. This covers a lot of ground of weirdness. There's a lot of weird in this book, but the main central weird thing that happens is a volcano starts to grow in the middle of Central Park in New York City. You follow a bunch of different characters who are all in their own way experiencing different weirdness that is all happening at the same time on planet Earth. So including the volcano in Central Park, we have a character who is plunged back 500 years in history. Suddenly, we have a character who suddenly starts absorbing the consciousness of every living thing around him, starting with a bee. So he just kind of starts absorbing the consciousness of everything. There's houses that get up and walk. Sorry about that. I got interrupted because we have a tow truck who is coming to tow away our car because it won't start. Yay, 2025. Whoop. What was I saying? My Volcano represents something very, very special. I discovered $2 Radio and immediately fell in love with them, and then discovered that they had a bookstore in their headquarters city of Columbus, Ohio, and I immediately put it on my wish list of places to visit. One year, a couple years ago, we went on a spring break trip to visit Columbus to see family, and then also we spent some time in Hocking Hills, which is a beautiful, beautiful state park in Ohio. Yeah, I got to visit $2 Radio's bookstore, and it was so wonderful. And I bought this book there. I bought a whole big pile of books there. I am someone who in particular loves publishers who are located outside of major publishing hubs like New York. I really love Midwestern publishers. I love publishers who are dedicated to their local community, like $2 Radio very much is. I just love those regional publishers and what they do for their community, and the voices, the fresh voices they bring through their books that they publish. I just mentioned this next book as an honorable mention in my favorites of 2024. This is How to Draw a Novel by Martine Solares, and it's translated by Heather Cleary. This book is so fun. It takes famous novels and turns their structure into these sketches. So let's see. So for example, you have the Odyssey. You can see the twisting the spirals that take Odysseus out of, away from his journey home. You have Moby Dick. This is, I've never really felt compelled to read Moby Dick actually until I read this book and saw the explanation for the digressions that are famously a big part of Moby Dick. And this is how Martine Solares depicts those digressions as these loops. I just loved the way this book made me think about structures of novels. And I loved it so much that I took the short list of the Republic of Consciousness Prize, which is a prize I've been reading through, the long list, for the past 2 years, and plan to do so again this year as well. I took that short list once it was announced, and I drew out the structures in this kind of sketchy way. It was so fun to do that and to think about those books in a much more visual but also boiled down way. This is a really cool book if you are a writer of fiction also, because I think it'll help you think differently about your own fiction and how you can boil it down for yourself and picture it as you're trying to grapple with the structure of whatever it is you're working on. This is published by Grove. Number 6 on my list is The New Animals by Pip Adam. This is published by Dorothy. This represents another annual tradition now on this channel, which is letting you all, my viewers, choose my fall pre-orders from a list of books that I've researched and investigated and come up with. I put that list out there and let you all vote on it so I know what to order and read for the fall. And that's another video I have coming up soon. It was another huge hit this year. The books that you picked for me were phenomenal, but this is from last year. This book is wild. It's on this list to represent that annual tradition, but also to represent the kind of weird books that I like to read. This is a novel about a group of employees who all work for the same small fashion label in New Zealand. They range from, designers to seamstresses, sewers, to photographers, to makeup artists, to hairstylists. They are all called last minute emergency meeting by the owner of the fashion label to prep for a very, very last minute photo shoot that's going to happen the next day. So they have to work all night to pull together everything they need for this fashion shoot. It alternates between perspectives of various employees within this little company. It's about class differences, generational differences, and then you hit the last 60 pages and you get one of the characters that you haven't really entered the mind of up until that point. A lot of pages of that character swimming through the ocean, and you have no idea why this character is doing that. You don't know where they're going until the last page. So worth it at the end, where you, at least for me, when I realized where this character was going. Not for the faint of heart, I would say. You gotta like kind of weird stuff to enjoy this book. In any case, it represents some of the different kind of writing that I really enjoy, and also my annual tradition of having you all vote on my fall pre-orders. I spent a lot more time in my first year on YouTube talking about poetry, and I got away from that a little bit. I would love to bring that back. One book that I've read in the past, not this year, it was the previous year, that belongs on this list because it changed the way I read a lot of what I read, is From by Monica Youn, and this is published by Graywolf. The poet, Monica Youn, is actually a lawyer. There are several poems in here where that really comes through in a really cool way, and I loved that. But what this poetry collection did for me was change the way I, as a white person, read a lot of the books that I read. This poetry collection holds no punches when it comes to calling out readers like myself who really are like tourists when we come into a work of literature that is written by an author who is from a community that is more marginalized than the one that we or I come from. And as a quote unquote tourist, I can step into a work hoping to learn something, hoping to experience something I don't know much about because of my own life and my own privileges. Really, it's like being a tourist. I can step in, and at the end of the book, I can step right on back out and, have learned something, have experienced something, but I get to leave it in the book, right? Just that analogy of seeing myself as a tourist reader, because it spoke to a lot of things that I was reading about and knew, but I think just that very clear analogy of being a tourist to a book helped me a lot, and what I have read ever since. And it's a beautiful collection. It's just stunningly beautiful. The title From comes from the experience of Monica Youn being Korean American and having the experience of someone asking her where she's from. And I believe she was raised in Houston, Texas. And so the answer, Houston, doesn't satisfy everyone who asks her where she's from. And they will sometimes say, no, where are you from? Next up, we have a book of short stories from Sofia Samatar called Tender. This is from Small Beer Press, another publisher that isn't currently publishing right now, another publisher of fantastic, weird, fantasy, fairy tale, dark type of fiction. It's a bummer, but this short story collection is another book that changed the way I read. Sofia Samatar, I think, is a brilliant writer. My first experiences with her were her two, A Stranger in Alondria and Thing with Wings. Her two fantasy novels that take place in the same world. Those were the first two of her books that I read, also from Small Beer Press, and then I read Tender. Sofia Samatar changed the way I think about narration, in particular first-person narration. At some point in my early years as an adult, I remember someone not very smart saying something about how only amateur writers or writers in their beginning of their career write in first person. That the more serious way to write would be in third person, or that people who write in first person are mostly writing for younger audiences. And so that somewhere planted itself in my brain. I came to realize over the years of reading phenomenal, brilliant fiction written in first person from brilliant writers that was just the stupidest thing anyone could ever say. And one of those people is Sofia Samatar, and she changed the way I think about first person narration in my own work and in anything I've ever read since that is written in the first person. And that is to think about who is telling the story, why they are telling the story, who are they telling the story to, where are they telling the story, and how is the who, why, where, and when determining the how. How are they telling it? What are all those elements coming together doing to the how they're telling it? Is it a letter? Is it in the middle of a trial, telling a story for a trial? What elements are coming together that make it so this narrator can tell this story at this moment? Why haven't they been able to tell it before? And who isn't telling the story? Whose voice isn't being heard in this story? Honestly, it was this collection that made that light bulb go off for me, because almost every story in here plays with that. And I love that so much. Sofia Samatar's work is not an easy read. She writes really luscious prose, and it's not easy to read, to be perfectly honest, but it is full of so much depth. So yeah, I love her. Next up, number 4 on my list, my top 10 list. We're working down, if you haven't noticed. Number 4 on the list, Sister Golden Calf by Colleen Berner. I've talked about this book all the time, but this is about 2 sisters who are grieving their mother, and as part of their grieving process, they go on a road trip in the New Mexican desert, and they encounter lots of quirky characters along the way. It is beautiful. This represents a really fun kind of turning point in my channel, and that Split Lip Press, who published this book, reached out to me and let me know about this book. I don't accept free copies of books because I don't have the space and I don't have the time to read them. But the book sounded like something I would really love, and so I bought it myself. And I read it and I did love it. I also felt like this world was so vivid that I made a Pinterest board for it, which was really fun. But I was also really proud of the video I did reviewing this book, because it represents something that I really want to be able to do more of, and I wish I knew how to package better for YouTube. And that is review a book, but tie it to a broader theme within literature and a broader cultural and social theme as well, or question. And in this instance, that question was, why is there a lack of literary road trip novels that feature only women, where the women are not accompanied by men and aren't running from men? Why is there a lack of such road trip novels in literature? And I really enjoyed putting that video together and was really proud of it at the end of the day. But it also represents something that was really scary for me too. One of the coolest parts of this book is that at the end of it, I realized there was not a single man in this book. Not a single one. And I went and listened to an interview with the author and realized that they purposefully did not include men in this world, because they did not want the 2 women at the center of this novel to be on a road trip and have to have any fears about being attacked by a man. And so there are no men in this book. It's not like a science fiction thing. It's not like men have disappeared. It's not like there's any explanations for how the women exist in the world without men. They just aren't there. They're not needed for the story. They're just not there. They're not there as a threat, and they're not there in any way. I kind of wish I had pushed that point a little more in the video, but I think it's a bit indicative of the problem in general that I actually felt afraid to. As a woman on the internet, I was afraid to make too much of a point about that and how cool it was. I'm still a little nervous talking about it. And it's just, I think, the reality of being a woman on the internet. There's just a lot of nastiness out there. Number 3 on my top 10 list is Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Au, and this is published by New Directions. This was the inaugural winner of the Novel Prize, which is a really cool prize that is given out by 3 different publishers together. Giramondo in Australia, Fitzcarraldo in the UK, and New Directions in the United States. And this also represents a video and a book review that I was really, really proud of. They take so much time for me because I put a lot of research into them, so I haven't done a lot of single book reviews. At the end of the day, I've been really proud of each of them, and this one in particular. So I took a book that a lot of people were talking about at the time. This was getting a lot of buzz. A lot of people were reading it and loving it. And so I picked it up too because it sounded great. And I read it and I realized that I didn't quite agree with what other people were saying this was about. So a lot of people were saying this was about a strained relationship between a mother and a daughter. So it's a mother and a daughter take a trip together to Japan. And they have kind of bizarre strained communication style, and it's a very quiet book about their trip to Japan together. But to me, this is not a novel about a mother-daughter relationship. This is a novel about whether or not a novel is an adequate form to depict something as complex as a mother-daughter relationship. Whether that is something that can be adequately captured through language alone. Whether a mother-daughter relationship, even just simply a mother-daughter trip to Japan, can be captured adequately through ink and symbols on a page. And that's what I think this book is about. I won't go any further than that. I will leave a link to my full video below so you can go check it out yourself, because I go into it in much more depth there. Number 2 on the list is Pure Ketchup, A History of America's National Condiment with Recipes by Andrew F. Smith, and this is published by the University of South Carolina Press. This book made it onto my radar because of YouTube. My son and I were watching a YouTube video about the history of ketchup, and at the end of the video, they mentioned that the expert they were interviewing had a book, and my son said, let's look up that book. So I picked it up, and it is a really interesting history of ketchup, all the way from its origins in Southeast Asia through to England and Europe, where it went through all sorts of iterations of mushroom ketchup, fish ketchup, walnut ketchup. Any ingredient you can imagine was made into a ketchup. Made its way to the United States, where the dominant fruit that was made into ketchup was, of course, the tomato. And then at the end, as promised, with recipes, there are a bunch of these really cool recipes for any kind of tomato ketchup you could imagine, but then also raspberry ketchup, rum ketchup, red pepper ketchup, pimento ketchup, oyster ketchup, celery ketchup. You know, it's not the most literary of nonfiction, but it is interesting. The recipes are not all super usable, but it is so fun and so interesting. And the reason it makes this list is because this prompted a ketchup tasting contest with my family. We took several brands of ketchup, we taste tested them, we decided which one was our favorites, and it became kind of a family meme, I guess. It became a family joke, a family thing that we talk about all the time. I vlogged it. To this day, I get gifts of ketchup. Just for Christmas, my brother gave me a bottle of plum ketchup for the holidays, which is supposed to be really good on meatloaf. That's the memory that makes this book number 2 on my top 10 list. And finally, my number 1 book on my top 10 list out of 100 videos can only be the one and only Martha Moody by Susan Stinson. This is also published by Small Beer Press, so I'm not sure if it's in print at this point, but it was originally written in the 90s and then went out of print, and then Small Beer Press was like, why is this amazing book out of print? Let's reprint it. So they republished it. I wish more people would read this book. It's so sweet and heartwarming and beautiful. This is a story of Amanda, who is a woman in an unhappy marriage who lives in pioneer days. So she lives, out in the American West during the pioneer days, and she befriends and then falls in love with Martha Moody, who is the owner of the local grocery store. So Amanda and Martha start this affair, and in the meantime, Amanda starts secretly writing stories and sending them out to be published. And she becomes secretly, like under a pen name, she becomes a famous writer, and nobody in the town realizes it. Those things kind of come together dramatically towards the end, but this is a book about becoming a writer. It's about myth making in America. It's about love. It's about community. It's about food, and it is about butter. There's a lot of butter in this book. And so what did I do? I churned my own butter and I filmed it and I put it on YouTube. This was a book that I loved with all my heart, but it wasn't just the book that made me love it. It was the experience, you know, the hands-on experience of making butter that really cemented this book's place in my heart. These videos for me are really, for the most part, a creative endeavor. They're a creative outlet for a very restless mind. And so what I wish I could do more of is videos like that, where I'm not just sitting down and talking to you, but actually getting up and making some butter. That's the kind of quirky stuff that I like to do and I find fun. And it also helps me remember the books more and love the books more, is when I do stupid stuff like that. Okay, so I had to stop filming quickly because our car is being towed away because it won't start. Yay. Yeah, I guess I'll just end here by saying, if you are interested in that quirky kind of literary fun where we're churning our own butter just to have more fun with a book, then I hope you will continue to join me here. My car's being towed. My name is Sarah. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.